What is a villain? When I was growing up, my idea of a villainous character was basically Dr. Evil from Austin Powers type characters. Bold, creepy, and slightly campy, with a cat on their lap for no apparent reason. Then, as I grew older and experienced different genres in fiction, my idea of a villain changed, becoming more complex. Villains are multifaceted with different strengths, weaknesses, and layers. But what kind of villains are there? How do they work? And what are the ways in which they can be written? Let's delve in. From my study of new and old, fictional and non-fictional content, I have come to recognise the most common, shall we say, forms of villains. These fall into 6 categories: morally grey, the obstacle, the motivator, malevolent freedom, sympathetic antagonist, and the good guy. Each of these forms often work for specific genres, but are generally interchangeable depending on the story you want to tell, who your protagonist is, and how your antagonist connects with them. This connection is vital because an antagonist is as important, if not more so, as your protagonist. Without an antagonist, your story and your protagonist have no drive, and as such, your antagonist needs to be strong. As Charles Harris says, to create a strong antagonist, make sure that you provide them with strengths and flaws as you would a protagonist. Giving the antagonist a number of admirable traits adds complexity and involves the audience at a deeper personal level. This is where the 6 categories come in. So we'll be looking at each individually as to the benefits of the villain types, how to implement them, and why they work well as an antagonist. So let's start with the morally grey. These guys are often aware that their actions not only will have consequences, but may not necessarily be right. However, in their mind's eye, they can deem it necessary. These villains can usually be found in thrillers, action, and dramas. A perfect example of the morally grey character can be seen with Zahir, leader of the Red Lotus in Legend of Korra. Zahir and the Red Lotus's agenda is to have the humans and spirits coexist again and usher in a new world order by dismantling the established nations and their leaders, and later the Avatar, the ultimate power figure, by plummeting the world into chaos. He is a true anarchist and believes that without these establishments, the people can find true freedom. And because of this belief, he sees nothing wrong with his actions. When we see him harm our protagonist, nearly killing her in the same way as he killed another, we feel true fear, because we know he won't stop until chaos reigns. Zahir was terrifying because we could understand his reasons, even if they were extreme. But to implement this antagonist, the main thing to remember is that they should be at odds with your protagonist, especially in terms of ideology. This antagonist sees the world in grey. They take an extreme utilitarian approach, believing the ends justify the means. Think, what does your protagonist believe in? Then, for your villain, how could this belief be twisted? Or does it have a realistic opposite? When these come together, you will have your conflict. A morally grey antagonist motivation allows the author to explore theme in a way evil antagonists cannot. It more easily allows for a comprehensive discussion between multiple viewpoints, creating a multi-dimensional protagonist-antagonist relationship that is not simply physical, but ideological. Ideology conflicts can come in many forms. including with our next antagonist, the obstacle. Well, it's what it says on the tin. They are the obstacle to the protagonist, creating such things as the inciting incident or rising action. More often than not, these antagonists are seen in romance, comedies, and general light fictions. However, this doesn't make them any less of a threat or source of conflict for our protagonist. Take Crazy Rich Asians, for example. The opposition to our protagonist Rachel is Eleanor, Henry's mother. She is the matriarchy, the person that Rachel needs the approval of to keep Henry's home life happy and secure. Eleanor is the obstacle because, due to her position as an upper-class, rich socialite, both she and Rachel are in conflict, as Rachel is from a lower-class, single working mother family, an image that does not fit with Eleanor's idea of society, or in her family. It is Rachel upsetting the status quo that leads to the later blackmail from the two matriarchy positions in the young family, and later Rachel proving she is above Eleanor and cares more for Henry, because she wants what's best for him, showing that she is in fact the stronger character. When writing these kinds of antagonists, what needs to be remembered is that, while they may not be the physical threat like most others, to our protagonist, they are what is keeping them from their happiness. Their villainy is subtle, but strikes a blow that could make or break our protagonist, and this fact alone makes them the most devastating. Similarly to the obstacle, we have the motivator, the character who drives them to act, whether out of duty, necessity, or even guilt. Whatever the reason, this antagonist is the cause of it, either because they are a threat to the protagonist, their world, or their ideals. This is your action, fantasy, crime, or even thriller flick antagonist, who often creates the climactic battle for good and evil. One example of the motivator can be seen in Narnia's The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe's White Witch, Jadis. Her goal is what drives the Pevensies to action. They are the true kings and queens of Narnia, but Jadis has taken the throne, and knows that they face a threat to her reign, so they must be dealt with permanently, starting with Edmund, the most easily manipulated. It is when she holds him captive that it introduces the need and drive for the other Pevensies to become involved. Prior to his capturing, they were happy to return home. This was their motivation, and Jadis their motivator. Because she drove them to action to save Edmund, it later led to their striving to save Narnia, and later become the kings and queens. To create these motivator antagonists, you need to give them a goal that causes direct conflict with the protagonist. However, make their goal believable and their actions justified. A false queen who plans to kill the true royalty through trickery is more interesting than cursing a baby because they weren't invited to a party. They have to be a force for good in the protagonist. The main opponent is the one person in the world best able to attack the great weakness of the hero. They will either force the hero to overcome his weakness or destroy him. The opponent makes it possible for them to grow. And Jadis knew how to manipulate their weaknesses, their love for their family, their wants, desires. She understood and analysed, almost to the same level as our next antagonist. Malevolent freedom. Now they are what we'd call the embodiment of evil, with no sense of shame, guilt, morals and so forth. In a sense, they are free from the bonds of society. This antagonist is often found in crime, thrillers, horrors and fantasy due to their malevolent nature, and they are, more often than not, what we think of when we think villain. One of the greatest examples of this malevolent antagonist is none other than Heath Ledger's Joker from The Dark Knight. Not only is he the opponent to Batman as an advocate for anarchy, He strives to prove that, if given the choice and freedom from morals, humanity would do as they want, while our protagonist Batman believes that every being has a choice between good and evil. He commits crime because he can. He understands there is a darkness in everyone. He's just unafraid to let it out. The Joker is one of the most terrifying and charismatic antagonists in cinematic history, and so far, not many have lived up to this standard. But to give this antagonist a go, you need to be aware that they will need to delve deep into what we as a human race consider immoral, but they must still be realistic, because while they may be malevolent, they must still be interesting and have a reason for their actions. The Joker wants to prove that anyone could step into darkness. So it begs the question, what does your character want to prove, and how will they do it? If there is nothing wrong with them, then there's almost certainly nothing to attract our attention either. Much more interesting are the rough edges, the darkness. Our favourite characters are the ones who, at some silent level, embody what we want for ourselves, the good, the bad, and ugly too. Now, while it's great to have a terrifying antagonist that we will remember, often the ones that stand out are those who are driven to their actions, but can change if they wish to. Like the sympathetic antagonist, this is the character we can't help but either root or sympathise with, the type who is most likely to achieve redemption given the chance. Those who have been shaped by their past, driven by an external or internal force, or any number of things that make us realise the why of their character. These drives are what makes them human and makes us sympathise with them. Take Regina Mills from Once Upon a Time, also known as the Evil Queen, a name you'd think would only be given to someone under the scope of malevolent freedom. But how she became the Evil Queen is what makes her sympathetic. Regina was abused by both mother and mentor, seemingly betrayed by the young Snow White. Her true love, Daniel, is killed because of this, and she then endures a forced marriage to a man older than her father. Now, throughout the series, while Regina battles back and forth to find her happiness, a slow and painful redemption arc builds. We begin to understand her actions because we learn about her past and what she has endured. We may not agree with what she has done or justify it, but we sympathise. In turn, our lead protagonist, Emma Swan, and the two women's son, Henry, begin to forgive and understand her alongside us, helping us to follow the journey of the sympathetic antagonist through the protagonist's eyes. Sympathetic antagonists can be the most interesting. They are the villain that your audience may invest in, even root for, because they either understand or feel for what they've been through. When writing your sympathetic antagonist, think about how they became this antagonist and why. Then when all is said and done, give them a goal. For Regina, it was finding her happy ending. What will it be for your antagonist? How will they overcome their internal tragedy? Or will they even try? But this sympathy can often be misconstrued by the antagonist, as seen with the good guy. The guy who doesn't believe they are doing wrong. Their actions in their mind's eye are those of a hero, a justified one. This antagonist can be found in nearly every genre, as they can be the most challenging and interesting, because their goals can often coincide with the protagonists. They just take a different approach. Take John Hammond from Jurassic Park. His aim for the park was to create an educational experience so we as a people can understand the past. Same as Alan Grant. Both he and John are frustrated because people now don't understand or care about the past. It needs to be exciting to keep them interested. Enter Jurassic Park. Then bad planning, organisation, and if we're honest, greed leads to the disaster that was Jurassic Park, and then the fallout that occurs in the later films. Hammond created a problem that killed many, and as we see in the second film, while he may feel guilt for their deaths, he's still a corporate man convinced his brilliant plan will work, and as such, he denies the problem. And as we see in Jurassic World, his actions continue to cause harm, because he saw nothing wrong with bringing back the extinct. This is what makes the good guy antagonist interesting. We as an audience can see their point of view, maybe even understand or agree with them. This character needs to be believable, their actions, their motivation, realistic. When writing the good guy, think of a good action that, if used too much, can become negative. If you understand your villain and build them to be complex, they will stand out. Villains, antagonists, opponents, whatever you want to call them, they are, more often than not, what brings intrigue and interest into the story, because without them, there isn't a drive for our protagonist. Every story needs a villain, be it a physical, mental, or natural threat. They are the source of the plot. Everyone remembers the villain. So how do you want yours to be remembered? Hey guys, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope it helped in your development and understanding of villains in some way at least. In the description box down below, you'll find links to some more villain archetypes that you could give a go, as well as some exercises to create or improve your villain. Like EA Devereaux's villain worksheet for the initial skeleton creation of your character. Or try out Writing Forward's tips for writing villains. Lots of other lovely good stuff is down there, as well as the links to my Instagram and Patreon, where on Patreon you can get early access to any and all of my videos, as well as have a say as to what comes out in future. Here on YouTube, if you guys aren't already subscribed, be sure to click the button down below or click the one popping up here on screen. If you want to check out any of my previous writing studies, the playlist will be popping up here, as well as something else for you lovely folks. In general, thank you again so much for watching this video, and I'll see you guys next time.